Good afternoon. We'd like to welcome everyone who's in attendance and watching online to the February 13th, 2024 City of Little Rock Board of Directors agenda setting meeting. Members of the board, are there any questions on anything on our consent agenda? Any questions on anything on our consent agenda?
Mayor.
Director Adcock?
Number 5 on the consent.
Yep.
Yes.
I have a question on it, please.
Yes.
Jenny Bradford is here.
Yes. Director Adcock, if you wouldn't mind pulling your, thank you.
This is, what type of assistance is this going to purchase?
It's a contract extension with EAP, and Jenny Bradford is here to answer specific questions.
I would like to have that, please.
Ms. Bradford. And Director Adcock, as she comes, this is our traditional employee assistance program for a lot of therapy and mental health services.
My apologies. I didn't catch the tail end of the question because I was walking up here.
On item number 5, what type of assistance is it going to provide?
EAP has been our employee assistance program for a while. Any kind of mental health assistance they provide, it can either be you choose to go on your own for various different types of things, depression, alcoholism, divorce, whatever it may be. You can choose to go on your own. It's available to our employees, and it's available to anybody in their family. It's also the service that we use when someone is suspected of alcohol abuse or drug abuse or something like that whenever they are on the job, and they do that as well. They also come in and do trainings for us throughout the year on various different topics. But it is available to all of our employees and their families.
So that includes their children?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Members of the board, any questions on planning items 9 through 19?
I have another one on item 7, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is this the parking deck, or is this the ground parking? Or what is it on 2nd and Main?
Director Adcock, it's the parking lot. And the property descriptions in the lease were incorrect. And so LRCVB brought this to our attention that it needed to be corrected, and the AMP Commission has acted to correct it. And so that's why it's before the board.
Okay. So it is for city employees too?
I will look into that for you.
Okay.
Mayor,
Mr. Carpenter?
on the consent agenda, I just wanted to let the board know that we anticipate that there will be a resolution to renew the lease between the city and the University of Arkansas Little Rock for the use of Kerr and Conway Field for their intercollegiate baseball program. And that should be in the Pony on Friday. And was hoping it could be on the consent agenda.
Director Wyrick?
Mine is on item number 9. I would like a report from Mr. Collins as to what we're doing. And it says that we're waiving some Boundary Street improvements, and so I'd like to know where those might be.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Board. If we could bring up a site plan or the sketch plan for this property. They're wanting to rezone this property from a C3 and a planned development to revert it to C4 open display for it. And so if everybody's been out there, it's a little bit south of our existing fire station. For some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, just for orientation, if you're looking at the screen, University is to the right, 65th Street would be to your left if you can't see the label on there. So Some of this we're going to talk about. It's right now, it used to have auto detail shops, auto wrap shops, that location, so it was auto related. There's a portion of that land that was undeveloped on there. The future land use plan does call it to be commercial, and there is C4 zoning down University. So if we can pull up the zoning map, you can see some of the other C4 zoning in the area. So we wouldn't need to be amending the land use plan for that location. They are requesting, as Director Wyrick talked about, it's the Boundary Street improvements on South 63rd Street. Did I say 65th last time? It's 63rd Street's the one that's to the west. Since University is to their east, and that's their frontage road, they're requesting that Boundary Street improvements be waived along that roadway. The Boundary Street ordinance does not grant them a waiver on that. If development comes in, they'd have to do both sides of it. Some of the conditions that they put in here also, that there's no future access on 63rd Street. There was a concern raised for the residences. You can see the residences just to the west over there going on 63rd Street. Their only access actually is just north of the fire station on University. It is a substandard roadway, width-wise minor residential at best, with some pavement failures in some areas. So if this is approved, we requested that a no access easement be placed on that western property line, so that in the future, no access from that property in a C4 development would have access to 63rd Street on there. There was no registered objectors at the Planning Commission. It was on consent and remained, so 11 ayes and no nays was recorded and was approved. So if there's anything else, any questions you may have specifically?
No, that's pretty good. I did talk to Mr. Joe White about this, and we were going to try to meet up and discuss it, but we never got together on it. But one of the things that I told him, you know, a PCD is something that I've always liked, because you know what you got. You know, and if there's any changes from the PCD, then, you know, it has to come back before the board. So it's kind of some assurances for the residents in the area. In this case, we're going from PCD to C4 open display district. Apparently, the staff thought that was okay in this case to go from a PCD to C4. What was the thinking on that?
Well, a portion of it was the plan development, and another portion was the C3. And we have combined those and made a new plan development on some cases. The reason that we supported the C4 is there's other tracts of land down the University corridor that are zoned C4 for that. So they are all open display zoning. Primarily that was done back in the day when there was a lot of dealerships down that road.
Right.
And even with the used auto dealership. So there is still C4 zoning in the corridor. I wouldn't say it's dominant that it's all C4, but there are other tracts of land that if you look at just a location and a competitive nature, they are open C4. So that's why we supported the straight zoning.
Okay, and Joan may have more details on this than I do, but does the applicant for this property also own some additional property down University that he just bought?
That I do not know.
Okay.
That would be a question for the representative or the applicant.
Okay, I think Joan mentioned it to me. Okay, so this 63rd Street, the plan is that there's no access from this property to 63rd. And there's no conflict with the fire station as with this development?
Well, I can't speak for Chief Hubbard. As far as a traffic stance, there would be no additional traffic onto 63rd, so that would not be in any conflict for it. Some of the other stuff that when I went out there and observed and had discussions with the engineer representing them is there's also a retaining wall that's really tied to the site development right there on that west side of the property line that is in bad shape, that does need to be repaired and replaced. So that is going to be, that's part of the site development plans. That's not part of their boundary street. So that would not be waived. That has to be repaired because there's several sections that is sloughing off, starting to fall, that it does need to be repaired, whether it's accessed or not. But right now there's no access proposed.
So I drove down there and I saw that, but the way everything is set up, you don't know what's, for this development and what's part of the street and all that. So I'm glad to know that they're going to take care of that.
Yes.
That wall that's there. So going from a PCD to straight zoning you don't think that's an issue?
Like I said, for the C4 zoning in the area, it allows them to have the same zoning as some other tracts of land in the immediate area.
Okay, we seem to be getting out in that corridor a lot of retail, office, warehouse type of development. Do you think that's the trend for University and the access road toward the west?
There has been some shift in that. Some of those office complexes have been more, I wouldn't really say industrial in nature, but I'm trying to think exactly. I think it's not right across the street, but the Jack Tyler Engineering, they read that's definitely an office, but it's more of an office warehouse. They're kind of reusing some of those older facilities. I do think some of those old car dealerships, that's a viable use. I wouldn't say straight office. I would say probably more of that office warehouse, a little storage type of scenario would be good uses if those auto dealerships, because they have a lot of parking area, a lot of fenced-in area. I would say that would be a good reuse of that property if they're vacant.
I'm seeing a lot of, or several applications that are coming through where it's heavy equipment sales and office and warehouse. And they would have to have C4 to have the heavy equipment on display out on the property. So I'm just wondering if that's what is planned for this area. Did they give you any ideas as to?
I haven't been presented with that on specific ideas other than the zoning. And
did you get any building views? Did they give you any, what the buildings might look like, or?
I'll go look and see on some of their stuff. I do not remember any, and I don't have any in my files, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't something presented. I'll go look and see and provide that to the board if we have it.
Some of that area could stand a update. So a new application there might not be a bad thing. It would kind of clear up some of the stuff that's been there for years and nothing been done to it. So, okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Director Richardson. Director Richardson, you're on mute.
Okay, I think I got it. Can you hear me now, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Collins, for your presentation. And you may have answered my question with respect to the access easement. The undeveloped property that Director Ryan was inquiring about, that you talked about in your presentation, is that property the property that's fenced off or walled off, where you say we need to have repairing on the walls? Or is that open? Is it just clearly open? Is it fenced off or walled off, or what can you tell us about with respect to the undeveloped area as we move towards 63rd Street?
If I remember the site correctly, there's a building on the northern portion of the site, so that undeveloped is more on the southern portion of that tract of land. 63rd Street, on the east side of it, adjacent to their property, that's where that wall I was talking about that looks to be made of railroad cross ties in areas. And so in that development, that would be totally redone. It would have to just be able to make their grades and redo their parking area.
And that would be a requirement of their planning process, of their plan development, correct?
It'd be a requirement of their development plan, since it's not a condition of a plan development. We didn't believe that whether it's a straight zoning, whether it's a plan development, that any development on that tract of land should access 63rd, just due to the nature of the roadway, the age of
Right.
it, and getting
Right.
access. And it would actually be access on the backside. It would come along the north side of the existing fire station. That's how you get down to 63rd at that location. And we didn't want to add any traffic on that roadway from this development.
Got you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Director Adcock, is your hands?
Yes, I've got a question. I've got several questions. Jamie, first of all, the back of this property that we're talking about is approximately 4 to 5 feet taller than the roadway that is down here. It sets up here, the road that the people come in. There's actually 4 houses back behind this, and those people have lived there for a long time. So what materials, that wall, as you call it, is going to be within just a few feet of 2 of those houses. So what is that wall material going to be?
We would pick that material based upon the height of the wall, and you're correct, it is 4 to 5 feet. When I was out there, the size of it. Typically at that height, a wood or railroad timber wall, if it gets above 4, just wouldn't hold up very well for that location. We didn't require a specific material to be used. I would anticipate that a segmental wall would be a good use at that location. So block with grid ties that go back towards the development. They could also pour a concrete wall to hold it up, but I would not see a wooden wall of a railroad tie going back. I wouldn't think that would hold up what they would plan to do at that location.
When you say concrete, I think of a side of a prison or something, because this is right outside of these people's homes, very close to their homes. I would think that we would require something decorative, or at least something that doesn't look like a wall in a prison or a guardhouse or something.
That would align more with that segmental wall, the brick. You could actually change the color, the style of the brick
I'd
on
like
there.
to see the plans for that wall before we vote on this next Tuesday.
I will talk to the developer and let them know.
Okay, and I do want to talk to the chief, but also on this project, I guess I'm really concerned about 5 years from now that wall comes down. So will they have to maintain that wall?
Yes, it'll be on their property. It's theirs to maintain. And so we would have to, if something started to happen, we'd have to provide them notice to repair the wall on their property and then issue a citation accordingly.
Okay, but you're not requiring them to do any street improvements on the back?
Well, they're requiring a waiver of the Boundary Street improvements for
Can
that
we
back.
vote for this and not vote for the waiver?
It was in the write-up. I think if we do that, there'd be a change in what come through the Planning Commission. We'd have to talk to the applicant and see if that's substantial enough for it to go back through. But that is something that can be considered. It's just the process that we need to do to take care of that.
Well, you cannot call this path a street. I don't know what you call something that's not a street, but cars go on it. But you cannot call a street, it has no sides to it whatsoever. It just is like a pathway that you'd have out in the country, going from one farmhouse to the other farmhouse.
It is, and well, I was being, I guess, a little polite by saying it was substandard. But yes, it doesn't have curb and gutter. It doesn't have the width. It would not allow passage of necessarily 2 vehicles through there. And the pavement is substandard, so I would agree with that. That's why I wouldn't say that any other development can access the roadway.
What was staff's thought in saying they would accept no street improvements?
Well, for that, when you do improvements to a roadway, you would only be able to do half street. So that would be their requirement and would only be improved along their property. That is the only boundary street that we're required. It is more than that location adjacent to their property and the half street that needs improvement on 63rd. And a lot of times if you improve a roadway for just a section, but you don't look at the other sections of the roadway and improve other sections at that same time, then the sections that you improved stand a chance to fail. Like if there was a low spot and you didn't get the drainage out and they can't go off their property to get the drainage out, then what you built may or may not fail. And so it's just in looking what's out there, it would not be beneficial for that roadway just to have a section of Boundary Street done, but not the rest of the roadway.
Well, lots of times the builder does half and the city comes in and does half. So why would this not qualify for the city to do some improvements to it?
It could, but I do not believe that this road is currently on your bond program to be repaired.
Okay. I would like to hear from the fire chief too, please. Thank you. I do want this kept separate next week.
Which item is that again, Director Adcock? 9?
Yeah, 9.
Excuse me, Director.
Can I do a follow-up on
You've heard the
that?
presentation. I'm sure you've looked at it. Are you comfortable with this? And the reasons I'm asking that is all of the cities, what's that group right there at the corner of your building? For your firemen and the equipment right there at the end of the building.
Oh, the hazmat team?
Yeah. Our city's hazmat team is right there, and if they use this to come back to the back of that property for any reason, they would block off our hazmat team. And that is one of my main concerns on it, is that this in no way stops anything that our fire department is using that area for.
That was a concern of mine as well as my staff. But hearing Jamie's presentation as to those companies not having access to their street, that was a concern of mine, the access and egress of our fire trucks, being able to get in and out of there sufficiently. With them not having access, I think that somewhat aids us.
Have
as
you
far
asked for any signage or anything to go up there to make sure that that's not blocked in any way?
Yes, I would have no problem with following up to ensure that is the case.
Okay.
To ensure that we do have access. And
How often is that entrance going in and out of that back section of your fire station used?
probably daily, because the hazmat team responds throughout the entire city. They have the responsibility of the entire city, not just a particular district or area.
I'm asking for this to be left separate and hope that you can talk to Jamie and make sure that we have signage up there that is not going to block your hazmat team in any way.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
And you want to hold number 9 separate?
Yes.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Director Collins, and these just kind of some general questions. First, I've seen today and the past couple of weeks that there's a number of STRs on our agenda. Is that going to be for the foreseeable future? Like, how many are in the queue? Are we going to be having 10 every Tuesday?
For currently, yes, because we had some that was in the process of coming through. As we start enforcing on short-term rentals, it's going to be based on the amount that we enforce upon. So we have talked about how many can we legitimately bring through the process and not bog down the rezoning process. So could we go enforce on 50 in a month? Yes, we could. Do we want to put 50 or 225s on the board agenda? I think that would start, we'd have to add staff to do that for one, even on our enforcement side or our staff side that processes all the planning commission and the write-ups and stuff comes before the board. So what we, in general, so please don't hold me to this, is that once we start enforcing on them, then they would get in a queue process, and we would try to process enough to keep the planning commission around that 20 to 25 items per planning commission, which means we would be able to split those items. And Ms. Cox has already talked to us about, instead of taking all those items on one board meeting, maybe split those items into 2 board meetings after the planning commission, so that we're not hearing, 25, 30 at one time and then hear a few. So we would do our best to try to span those out and not overload what our current workload is to try to process those items.
How many applications have we received, do you know?
I think I can get those specific numbers. I believe right now we have close to 40 that's been approved.
59.
59 that's been approved. And then we have, I think, like 15 coming before, either through this one, but I'll get those exact numbers to you. And that should be the last ones that we have that come through the application process without enforcement. And I may have some stragglers. I'm not going to say that somebody won't decide to submit in an application without enforcement through this. It may come from word of mouth that we're coming out and looking at them. But hopefully you'll start seeing a little bit more come in from enforcement issues to get those rezoned, but we'll try to span those out.
And I know we talked about this offline, but just for the sake of the public, going forward with those upcoming STR applications, the ones that are existing, that are already in operation, we will include that into the write-up so we'll know which ones have a history of operations, correct?
Yes, for the record, what we talked about was, and it was a question that was raised in another board meeting, is were these existing? We got asked that before, so we're going to start putting on there whether they're existing, operating or not. We're going to put on there whether this is before the planning commission and the board under enforcement action or not. Did we go out and provide them notice, and or did they come willingly with the application without us telling them that they're operating without a business license? And also to research the police records to see if there's been any calls out there to that property. So because that's what we've talked about, that needs to be neighborhood driven. So what is actually happening in the neighborhood? Has there been calls out there? So we're going to start adding those to our write-up for every one of those.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Director Collins. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, Director Wyrick, then I believe Director Hines.
I just wanted to follow up on the road situation on item 9. I apologize for going backwards, but I drove down that street, and when you get down to the very end of the street, you barely have room to back up and get out of the driveway that's down there. And when I said you drive down there and you can't tell what's the applicant's property and what's somebody else's property, how many feet would they have to improve in order to take care of the boundary street improvement situation?
Okay.
And also, I'd like to know the length of it and the width of it. It might be that part of that street is actually in the yards. I mean, it's a narrow street, very narrow. So I don't know what that would look like in regards to the length and the width that would have to be done by the developer.
I will provide that to the board. If we could pull up the zoning map, I think would actually, since it's shaded. And if we could zoom in, I can show you approximately where their widening would be in relation to the remainder of 63rd. So if we zoom in just a little bit more. If you look, their boundary starts about between the 6 and 3 on the 63rd and runs south to where you're talking about that dead end roadway. So that would be the portion of the boundary street that if they put that in and the waiver wasn't granted, that's the portion, so half street of that. so it wouldn't be the other side. And I agree, as you get down to where the very end of it, and it does show that 63rd going onto their property. The GIS in this is not exact. I don't know if that's exactly what it is until we get the survey to look at everything, but that doesn't have a way to turn around at the end of the roadway. When I went down there, I had to back up in somebody's driveway to get out. And as you get down to that last house, it starts becoming their property is the best way. Yeah, it just looks like their property. Stuff was parked at the end of the roadway on there. And so they would be responsible between that 6 and 3 approximately all the way down on that one side to the south. So it doesn't get the entire 63rd done. That was my point I was making.
Right.
And if we choose to do it at some time in a bond project, whether those improvements could still be utilized or not depends on timing and depends on what the design of the entire roadway is, whether it could be utilized or not.
And the other thing was, you talked about that you've asked them to repair the wall there.
Yes, I made that. I told them that that would be part of their site development plans.
I didn't see that in the write-up that you've given to us. It seems like y'all are streamlining the write-ups that come to us, and I did not see that we had asked for them to do that. I might have overlooked it, but also I wanted to note that, but in our SDRs, I attend a lot of these meetings, and there's lots of people talking about lots of things at these different SDRs, and when I look at the write-ups, they're very streamlined. You don't see a lot of details as to the people that were there and what their issues were. You might say 3 people list their names, and then you say basically their concerns were this and this. And so I think if you added more to the write-ups when they come to the board, we'd understand what the application is about and the impact on the neighbors. So I would ask that be not so streamlined in the information that comes to us. And if there's pictures like this, this was added to us, but if we had pictures on STRs, and I don't know if these have them or not, but anything that's descriptive to us whenever we're looking at these applications, I would appreciate.
Okay, we'll get with staff and we'll start adding additional verbiage. And yes, we did streamline them. We streamlined it to be more of a neighborhood driven for that process. Now our minute records are very summarized.
And we used to get those.
Yeah, and so they're at the deal and they're very summarized on there because we rely on the recordings to be the actual record of the meeting. And since we're on YouTube now, and people can access those readily. But I understand what you're saying, and yes, we will add those if there's opposition, a little bit more detail on what they spoke about.
Yep.
We haven't been going out and taking pictures of the sites on there for either the planning commission or the board. If somebody presents them, whether they're in opposition or if they're for it, we save those and put them in our files that we can make accessible on anybody that presents anything. So we can start in our information that we send the board and the write-up we can get with, because those files can be pretty large. I don't know if we want to email them, but we will figure out a way that the board can have access to those files.
Well, and since you're not printing them anymore, we see them online. That's a much easier deal than the old days when you got 15 pages for one application. So it's not as much much information or paper or anything coming to us, because we can look at it online much easier. But I feel like some of the write-ups they're really dumbed down to where you don't really know what's going on. Because I know I saw one last week and I'm going, oh my gosh, there was 25 people there for this one, and there were only 2 things that were listed as their objections. And overall, that might have been maybe the most important, but I think we need to have the benefit of what's happening at the commission so we can make a better decision.
Understood.
Director Hines?
Hey, Jamie, when do we pass our short-term rental ordinance? Last year, 6 months ago?
Last year, it might have been 6 months ago, maybe that August, September timeframe. The 6 months would have been, well, actually more than, it hit 6 months because we gave a 6-month grace period. It ended during the Christmas break. So January 1st or 2nd when we got back was the first day that we could go out and start enforcing. So yes, it was.
It was June 20th.
Yeah.
That's what I was referring. So how many of these unregistered Airbnbs short-term rentals have we identified that we haven't enforced on yet?
We don't have that number.
Are we working any with the Convention and Visitors Bureau? Because they have had a lot of these identified because they're collecting heads and beds taxes on them. Are we coordinating with CVB any, or can we, Tom?
When we originally first started talking about this, we did coordinate with them. After we drafted the ordinance, a copy was sent for them to look at and review before the board made their final action. My understanding with the agreement that was reached based upon a lawsuit filed, and so I'm just talking generalities, is they do get information of what was collected, but specific locations were not part of that. So if they know a specific location, it's just from their knowledge, not from something that the company Airbnb has sent them. The only way that we could find that out is either going through the website ourselves and trying to find it from visual pictures of it, and we're in the process of sending an I guess this would be an RFP out to find a consultant to provide a service to scrub the internet and provide us a list. And then we'd have to go look from that list at those locations and see if one is operating to enforce.
Could we not compel those companies like VRBO and Airbnb to disclose that information since they're violating a city ordinance?
Yes,
Okay.
and we need to do so.
All right, that's kind of where I was going with this, because it gives me great pause to sit up here and the talk is, hey, we're giving you a 6-month grace period, but hey, unless we're having a problem with you, we're not really going to take enforcement action until we either find you or you start having issues at your, and I get that you've got bandwidth shortages, but this was the caveat when we passed this that I told everybody about it. You're probably going to kicking over a bucket of tribbles. I'm going to date myself as being a Trekkie, but there's probably more out there. If you find one or two, there's probably 10 or more have already multiplied. So I just, and the concern is we've got people that are trying to do the right way. They've used the grace period to register their things. And even some of them have gotten caught up in the debris field of people operating illegally. And so I think we need to make a definite distinction when it's coming before us. And I think the planning commissioners would probably want to hear it, that if somebody is still operating after our 6-month grace period, I think we ought to be trying to figure out who all these are, because I think, Tom, I'm not an attorney, but there's two up here with Director Phillips and you, but not going out and doing everything we can to identify and put them on notice puts us in jeopardy of arbitrary and capricious enforcement when it comes to our long-term rental folks that we are taking enforcement action on. That's just my old business law degree kicking in, that we need to probably be more robust on identifying, at least putting them on notice, even if it takes us a while to run them through the planning process. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any more questions on 9 through 19? We'll hold 9 separate. Seeing none, any questions on item number 20? Seeing none, any questions on item number 21? All right, Director Phillips?
This is not 21, but I wanted to make a statement afterwards.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. After, as y'all know, I've been working on the issues with our landlord-tenant laws and making sure they have the appropriate protection that we can provide them. I plan to draft an ordinance, Mayor, and if we could have a policy meeting on March the 12th, I will have the ordinance drafted by then and get it to the city manager to get it on the agenda. So hopefully, March the 12th is an agenda meeting. So I was wondering if we could have add that to a policy discussion for March the 12th.
Will do.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Director Campiris?
Thank you, Mayor. Two things. Emily, these microphones are great, but what happens is when you talk, and I was watching Lance, he was looking at Jamie talking, and he'd bring back to his mic, and the volume goes up and down. And I don't know what the expense would be to put a mic on each one of us to find out so you can truly hear what people are saying in here. Those of us over here very rarely get to hear anything, especially me. And then the second thing, Tom, BJ and I asked about what happens when we have road cuts and what the obligation is of the entity that cuts the road. And every day when I go up Overlook, and 2/3 of it has been resurfaced and the rest of it hasn't, and it's uneven. I think our law says that if you make a major cut, you've got to refinish the whole road. And we need I think a paper for what the law says. And then the thing that BJ brought up, I thought was very telling about the depth of the cut, who should be in the cut, and
Boring.
are we complying with that?
Yeah.
And I think both things, we're letting the utilities and people that are paying us franchise fees not to do the right thing. And so you've got the franchisees, but you've also got agencies that are associated with the city that aren't doing what I think is the right thing for the city. And when we spend bond money on a street and they come in behind us and do those things. And then the third thing that we used to have, a monthly meeting for the planning department and John Honeywell's department about who was going to be doing cuts where, so that everybody had to come to the meeting if you were going to make a cut, and tell people what they were going to do so that you could coordinate cuts and what was going in there. So those three things, if we could have an update on that, I'd appreciate it.
The last one on the meetings was to have them regularly, but it was also to have them in such a way because many companies actually plan for their cuts as much as a year in advance. And so if they know what the city is going to do, then we can plan around it that way.
Before, and Director Campiris, just a couple things. I see Director Honeywell may want to make a comment. Is that correct, Director Honeywell? And then secondly, Director Campiris, just so you're aware, and you may or may not, so if you are, forgive me, but I know Director Warwick had inquired about the boring policy. Director Honeywell sent that to the city board on February the 2nd, and we'll get it resent, but it was sent out.
Can we get a copy too? They didn't send us one.
Yeah, we'll get you that copy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We sent out a response to, I think, most of the questions that you
It was
asked.
February 2nd.
And when it comes to like the street cuts, those rules are all outlined in what we sent to you as far as what's required versus width, distance, that kind of stuff. We do not have a policy for depth.
And it normally comes from Ashley, and I think Takia sent it, so maybe if you all overlooked it, because it came from Takia.
But I'll be happy to send it again if we need to. That's no problem. And we do still have the monthly meeting with our utility companies to discuss our projects and theirs.
So again, Ashley, if you'll just resend what Takia sent on February 2nd, and then, as John said, we do have that monthly meeting, continue to have that. Director Richardson?
Yes, Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Following up on Director Phillips' request for a policy discussion, this question is for you or Emily. Do we not have one for today's agenda meeting? Because there wasn't one on the city's website, and I'm not there. I don't see the paper copy. Do we not have a policy discussion set for today's agenda meeting?
No, sir, we did not schedule a policy discussion for today.
Is there any particular reason why?
We normally schedule them based off of need and or determined requests. And
Requests?
yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Director Computers, your hand still up? Okay. All right. Any more questions from members of the board? Any more questions from members of the board?
Talk to you.
All right, meeting adjourned.